Yeah. Well, I just like to make comment in response to this idea about decolonizing the Cannabis Act. One of the things I see is an absolute necessity is that we educate the understanding of the effects and benefits of cannabis. Up to this point, we've had a very negative stereotype of cannabis in our community. It's like we even labeled it in the language in a negative connotation. We say kayukwaksa. It's not a good way to describe this plant that has all these benefits around. So for us, the Ungwehongwe people, we need to take some blinders off. We need to look at this in a more holistic, just like we do other plants, just like we do for Oyonkwa'ungwe, just like we do for New Hondesa strawberry plant. It has benefits to us, not only physical, medical, but spiritual. To me, cannabis can contribute to a spiritual well-being in terms of calm, in terms of peace of mind, in terms of, it's not an artificial thing, it's just it'll help you get there, I think. And I think a lot of people are that's absent in their life. So that's the first thing I would say is that the government, or at least the naysayers, have spent a lot of time telling us all the evils about this thing, and we haven't really heard an intelligent explanation. The second thing about jurisdiction and about authority is there's two things I want to say about that. One is that for about 2 years now, in Aguzasne, there's a group of people who wanted to go to the jurisdictions outside and request a cooperation, request a license to grow, to make a grow up. And some of you are familiar that Aguzasne is a really difficult geographical area in terms of jurisdiction. We've got three provincial authorities that affects us, our lives immediately, and 2 federal jurisdictions because we're always on the border. Whatever we do has to do with immigration. So you have to have Ontario and Quebec and New York. And when this first proposal was presented about 2 years ago at home to an well-organized group of people, they weren't hiding behind the trees. They were right up front and saying, we want to make a proposal to the community. They went door to door. They asked people what their opinions are. And basically they got shut down because of the overland jurisdiction. So I think they're still trying to formulate parts of it, but they weren't very successful because of the stigma of the conservative understanding of cannabis. And then about 3 years ago, there was this great big news broadcast in our area where this, I believe it was, there was a chocolate manufacturing place in Smiths Falls, Ontario, and they had this big factory, and they were making all kinds of chocolate bars, and I think it was Kraft. And all of a sudden, this company, Kraft, was going to move their operations to somewhere where the labor wasn't so high. So I think they moved to Ohio or something. So they left this great big complex, this new building, and they just left it. So the government was trying to figure out, they're always wanting to tax, and any kind of operation. So a couple of corporations, they went and acquired this building, and they have a fully functioning legal grow operations there, and they've only been there a year and a half, and now they're requesting the area to triple the size of their operations. So in a year and a half, they want to triple the physical size of their operation. What does that mean? That means somebody is buying into their idea. So this medical prescription for the use of this healing power is being commercialized, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's the corporations. So what does it mean for you and I? Well, like you say, they're gonna monitor this closely. They're going to look in everybody's backyard. They're going to look on everybody's canopy. Because they're going to want to control it for the purpose of taxing. That's the whole purpose that the government is going to want to do with cannabis is how can they tax it. Because that's the same thing they did with cigarettes. They make a lot of money on cigarettes, and yet for the Indian people, well, that's contraband. Because they couldn't figure out a way to tax us in the cigarettes, they called it contraband. The same thing's going to happen for cannabis, because the governments, the outside government, do not have an apparatus to levy an operations tax or sales tax or any of that. Because the longhouse people at home, we were developing a proposal to do a legal grow up, and we had people interested. We had a whole group of investors, legally people, judges, stuff on a board, and we were trying to propose to do a medical grow up. So we had come a long way in our development. But the people that were supporting this or financially were going to invest in it, they needed a letter from the federally recognized tribal council of Akwesasne, to just simply say they're going to be hands off and they're going to allow this to happen. That we are going to be responsible. We are going to regulate. We are going to give all the reports and all the activities. So we went to them. We wrote a letter and we said, here's our intentions, and we addressed the tribal council. I personally was there, and I said, look, here's our intent. We're not asking you to do anything. We're just asking you to let this flow as a project of community members. This is a community-oriented project. We feel that we can make some really good contributions in terms of this, that, and the other, employment and regulations. And they said, well, we're not sure. We don't know. We have to contact our lawyer. So, but what we knew and they didn't tell us is they already had their own proposal. They had already designed a project for them to do the very thing that we were talking about, but they were not as advanced as we were in terms of where's the money going to come from, although they have their own money, So basically they said, well, we don't know. We have to talk to our lawyers and stuff like that. So it got to their lawyer, and they basically badmouthed us. Their lawyer just didn't have any use for us. They'd attacked us personally, and they attacked the project. And then this woman lawyer that the tribal council had retained, is a long historical, anti-traditional people point of view. So we said, second meeting, we said to the tribal council, why don't we let the lawyers talk to each other about this, and us will wait until they come to some understanding. And our lawyer, we told the lawyers responsible for us to try to get a hold of so-and-so and so-and-so. She wouldn't answer his phone calls. She avoided him and avoided him. Finally, they got together and in no uncertain terms, no, this ain't going to happen. Well, I'm going to do everything in my power, including the prosecutory district attorney, to stop this project. Didn't have anything to do with that. The fact that the tribal council was already developed, they just didn't want longhouse people to have any kind of a socio-economical development. They saw it on the wall. So it got kiboshed. It was a legitimate. It was we had reports. We had development. We had our people had research. There's a group in Wisconsin, an Indian tribe that was already had a grow up and had issues. There was some in Oregon. We were in contact with all these people. We did our homework. The problem is that the non-Indian legal has a warped idea about what traditional councils are. They think that we're a bunch of criminals, they linger to prosecute people like myself because of my affiliation with Ludino Shunit and the Ludis Karaget. We've beat them in a couple of chess games and they resent that. And it comes into play. So the issue with decolonizing, we would get behind that because we think it's real. It makes sense to us. But we can't be. We have to figure out a way where we can't pollute the discussion with their failure to understand about what our principles are, because they're not going to accept it. They're not going to accept us. So we have to find some way to talk to them without the prejudices they have against Haudenosaunee councils. I mean, they can talk to the I'm sure they can convince the Andalas. Because they work with them anyway. They're already tribal council. They can convince the Mohawk Nation Council of Chiefs. I'm sure they can, because they work with them anyway. But for people like ourselves, it's a prejudice already. So that's what I have to say about this. I believe that we should push this because we've had people come to the Longhouse and they have explained to us that the chemical dynamics of cannabis. They had told us about the different effects of people's medical problems. They have told us about the areas that it can be used in oils, in safts, in all. And then this man spent 2 days with us, and he's a scientist. He's looking at this matter. He spent his life looking at this, and he says it's nothing but good. He says it's nothing but good. So we understood him, we listened to him, and we agree with him. It's good, but the overculture is going to want tax. That's going to be the dilemma.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any thoughts about how this might be similar to the beginnings or the origins of the tobacco industry, and how if you have a situation now in Tyndanaga where there's something like 10 cannabis dispensaries around the community?
Again, each community is a little bit different. What's happening in Tyndanaga will never happen in Aguasasne. Never. Because the Band Council Police Department is in the pockets of the RCMP. Okay? And we have two police forces in Aguasasne. We have Band Council Police and we have Tribal Police. They both are in cahoots very closely with federal. That's the difference with the Tyndanaga. They're not. Right? There's a little bit of distance between provincials and federals and the local Indian police. Kahnawake is also different. Kahnawake they don't have police, they have peacekeepers. Okay, and for the long history of the tobacco trade in Kahnawake, they always had hands off because they considered it economic development. They didn't enforce. But the feds were pressuring them to arrest so and so. They even set up sting operations to criminalize somebody, and the peacekeepers will no. So each community is going to be a little bit different. I don't know about Six Nations. I'm not aware of the relationship between the local police department and I'm sure the OPP don't have a good reputation in Oswego. I guess I could say that for sure. But the overall thing is that the police they always want to be in control. They want to have the upper hand. It doesn't matter if you make sense of what you're talking about. They'll tear that apart and put their control on the masters in federal, provincial, and again, the only reason they would approve of it is for taxation. That's the same thing with the tobacco industry. It wasn't contraband; it was untaxable to them. They couldn't find a way to tax it. That's why they had to criminalize it.
It seems that will be it'll be difficult for them to to enforce that taxation regime, given that cannabis can be grown on reserve relatively easily and it has a relatively low startup cost to get invested in it, and then especially in a place like Tyndonega, they have the 401 going right by, so there's lots of traffic, and they'll have that no tax advantage.
Yeah. As well. What I can tell you is that for me personally, I monitor the newspapers in upstate New York, and a lot of times I see people who have been arrested because the border is now patrolled very heavily with Homeland Security. Like the border patrol has upped the end. I mean, they're really sophisticated, and they're a large team of border patrols out there, and they're monitoring. So you see it often in the newspapers where somebody got caught with X pounds of marijuana and stuff like that. So this thing's been going on all the time. It's just that now, because of the potential of the regulations in Canada changing, the security because of Augustine straddles the border, they've built a surveillance wall. There's a surveillance wall there. There's a monitoring. There's a nighttime vision monitoring. I'm telling you, we're under the microscope of this, because we're looked at as the avenue where you could pass these things through. It's not any more fluid than any other part of the border, but it's just that we have a history of that, and it does exist. There's no question about that. So. I think Augustine has to set this one out, because we're just going to bring a lot of negative debate into the subject because of our past history. That's my sense. It may not be true, but that's my sense.
We were talking earlier about how pretty much any different substance or plant or drug or anything can be abused. Like it has its positive aspects, but it can also you can also abuse it. How would you propose dealing with that from the Longhouse perspective, in terms of a substance that is beneficial and has undoubted medical benefits and industrial and commercial applications, but which there's very real concerns about it being abused?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is I would plead with the families. Please have a discussion about this. Please talk about it in your family, because each family has different medical issues. Each family has social issues. Each family has behavioral issues, and it's unique and different families. And then it comes to the clan, the collection of families. We need to have a discussion in our community as to the benefits, but also some people have this lower tolerance of addictedness and misbehavior and abuse of this medicine. I call it medicine, So that's what I think would be critical for us, is that we have a very healthy discussion about the whole question. A lot of us are in the dark about it. A lot of us have heard bullshit about it. We've heard all the negativity of it, even out of the Catholic Church, So some of us have to filter through this information that we have in our mind, and we need to listen to the young people, what they think about that. Okay? That's what I think about it. It's if Canada legalizes it, then it's going to fall upon us. What's going to be our position? Because to us it should be free. The use of it should be free, but respectful use of it should be available.
Right. Because I guess in a sense it's really, you got to not only respect the plant, but you also have to respect yourself in terms of how you're using it.
Exactly.
And if there's I think there's a lot of conditions of colonialism and poverty and racism that make it so that people don't respect themselves or don't prioritize themselves or don't think about themselves in a healthy way.
Yeah. I say I can just see it where it could be rather disruptive to dysfunctional families. It would just add on to the issues. But then on the other hand, it could be so helpful. I mean, I had a sister who fought cancer 3 times. Okay, and her greatest on her dying times, the last 3-4 weeks, her greatest feeling is if she could puff on a marijuana to relieve her pain for a few minutes. This is on her dying bed. Right? My own sister said that. She said it in our language to me. So how can that be not good for some situations? This is what I have in my mind. This is the prayer of thanksgiving I have for her moment. I don't use this stuff. I don't. But I know people who do, and I know it benefits them. So don't take it away from them. I'll make it available for them to be relieved. Not to add to people's painful existence.
Could you just say the name and the language again for that's been used to describe cannabis? And is there another word or phrase that you would prefer or that you would recommend?
Well, like I say, the negative thinking people call it kayukwaksa. That's what most anybody who speaks in the language, that's what they call it. And it basically translates to bad tobacco. But we would say onukwa. Means medicine, just simple medicine. It's just a natural medicine, natural element of medicine. Onukwa. But everybody, back home, and everybody talks about it. So why do we call it kaingoksa? It's not a good way. Like you're discriminating against this thing before you even know what you're talking about.
Sounds like wacky tobacco.
That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the people who use that don't know. They really don't know. They've heard from somebody. They've heard from the local police or heard it from social workers who don't know what the hell they're talking about. People working in addictions, they don't know what they're talking about, but they call it kaingoksa. They don't know.
Well, it's such a thing too in terms of the historical criminalization of the plant, like going from being folk medicine used everywhere and grown and used for fiber, and to being something that was used to criminalize Mexicans, Ongohoe from the south, and black people, right, and to give the FBI something to do after Prohibition ended on alcohol, and of course benefiting the pharmaceutical industry who can't make money on it because anybody can grow it. Mm-hmm.
It's a big topic.
Mm-hmm. Would you be interested in if there was a gathering of the different people, the different Mohawks in the industry in Tyendinaga to talk about the plant or talk about a way forward, or even the different longhouse people that are, because there's a lot of I guess there's people, both longhouse and non-longhouse people, involved in the development of the industry in Tyendinaga, but it does really seem that it's over the last 2 years it's expanded to a level where it's a lot of the cigarette, or a lot of the, I mean it's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that in the Tyendinaga, I have a few friends that are in the industry, and they seem to be very positive about it. They don't see any downside. I don't know. I really truly don't know. But I sense that they're trying to get organized on a national level in Canada. They want to form some kind of an organization of indigenous people across Canada who are interested in this matter, and they want clarity. They want it to be clear what the heck they're talking about. They don't need the outside's negative connotation within their discussion. I've spoke to people who spend a lot of time looking at the benefits of it. The people who have dissected the chemical and who have put it in the oils and the way to administer through candy, through tea, stuff like that. It's not only just about smoking it. There's all kinds of other ways of administering it and to get the same effect. As I understand it, I don't know that to be true, but I heard people talking about it. And so I see a lot of potential for a lot of discussion. The problem is, it's like there are so many points of view. Like if we went to the Longhouse and brought up this subject, we would spend a lot of time hearing people's point of view, and then the majority of it, I think, would be in a positive manner. But there's going to be some serious naysayers on that question. People who have stories that ill affect somebody in their life related to the abuse of it. See, that's the difference. There's use, respect, and then there's the abuse of it. And people got to figure out that it's not the same. It's not a continuum. It's two different things. That's the way I really don't know a lot about the subject, but I would be happy to go and listen and to provide my understanding of background about who we are as it relates to the question that as it's raised. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. So one thing that's coming out of it is one of the things that the group, the National Indigenous Medical Cannabis Association, one of the things that's come up in their discussions is, well, okay, there needs to be some kind of a regulation on this in order to make sure that the medicine that's been grown is not doused with pesticides, or that it's or that you can tell the content of the THC content or the CBD content, or that there's a regulation of that and a testing. And so they've discussed developing the capacity to do their own kind of in-house testing, so they can affix labels saying this has been certified by this association and it has this and it's there's some accountability. If you're being made sick by the medicine that is supposed to be healing you, then you can do that. Yeah. And then there's also been this question of like, well, how do they ensure that, or like, I guess like, how do you give back? Like, what is the mechanism that the individual businesses give back to the community or give back to the Longhouse? If it's a Longhouse that's sanctioning this, this or acting as an umbrella or acting as a defense mechanism or legitimizing it. One of the things is like, well, is there, do you buy stamps that are affixed to the product, and then when you sell that product, that is not only approved by the medical association and has been tested through there, and I think there's a mass spectrometer for, I think, somewhere around $60,000-$70,000, and it can test anything and tell you what are the chemical components of it. But then do you have a system where you have that kind of labeling involved, and that's how there's a give back to the community? Because you get this question about like, well, people don't want to be taxed, and they also don't want to be they want to say, well, okay, I'll give back, but let me decide what maybe give a list of these are the things that could be supported, and I'll pick from that list and give to the person that I want, or I'll give back in this or that way. But it becomes a prickly issue, because you don't want to, in order to have the kind of, if you had a certain degree of regulation and oversight, then you essentially replicate the Western colonial state system of control.
I'll tell you, it's a very common, because we went through those very same issues with tobacco. All of the things that you mentioned, regulatory and monitoring, community benefit, all those things. For years and years and years, we've been debating this stuff, And although there was a very clear need, it never came to benefit. People always found an excuse to avoid the contribution part. They would find reasons why, or they would predetermine what the level of contributions are. I mean, we've been through this thing for 20 years or so, and it's a complicated formula. But I think there needs to be a formula. There needs to be an understanding of because it's going to affect the community. The community should have a voice and a saying what's the regulations are in this behavior. The longhouse can only be the reflection of the community. It's not a regulatory body, right? It's a reflection of the community. What the community consistently would require. You know, that's all I would say about that. And you know, as Haudenosaunee people, we have already certain guidelines and we have principles, and it's really clear, right? For the Haudenosaunee people. But what about our relatives, the Algonquins? They don't have that kind of like a format. What about the Crees? You know, how are we going to be able to get them to agree on consensus when they haven't? They probably had that before European contact, but to them consensus, they would say, "What the hell are you talking about?" Right? So when you're looking at it from a national perspective across the board for indigenous people, it's going to vary a lot. You know, so Haudenosaunee, I think, has a quicker chance to adapt to it. But we've been involved with it for a long time with tobacco. You know, and we've seen this picture before.
So what was the best case scenario with tobacco? Like, how was there a time when, like, especially when the industry was beginning, that the contributions were coming into the longhouse, and how was that done?
Yeah, basically, what had happened when they first started, it was the wholesalers that came to the longhouse and said, you know, we're in this business, and we would like to offer some kind of a contribution related to our distribution, and we want to be able to set it up so that somebody will accept the contribution and recognize it as what it was for. Okay, and it started. The people came there and they would contribute. But what happened inside our own organization, inside the longhouse, we didn't have the control mechanism. We didn't have the proper authorities to monitor it. People started raising the price of the contribution without talking to the wholesalers, and then they took offense to it. So we don't mind the increase, but could you tell us ahead of time? And what is it for? Why do you want 11 cents instead of 10 cents a carton? Stuff like that. And that's how it fell apart. Individual greed. That's what it was. So that's all it was, and we lost it. Later on, they organized themselves into what they come to know it as the Convenience Store Owners Association. This one was more widely happening. There were more cigarette stores, and the Convenience Store Owners Association decided they're going to make certain contributions. They're going to make a contribution to the tribal council. They're going to make a contribution to an organization to defend the community against taxation. It was called the Mohawk Anti-Tax Steering Committee. They're going to make contributions for charity. And then, on top of that, they were going to make their own individual contributions to projects that they sponsored themselves, like the volunteer fire department, the lacrosse team. These people were very happy to contribute, but it was under the umbrella of the tribal council. And that fell apart because one particular individual got elected to the tribal council, and he kiboshed everything. Jim Ransom. But basically, he said, no, everything belongs to the tribal council. The tribal council does not have any authority to tax anybody. That's not one of their authorities. But he made that assumption, and that's what happened. It fell apart. It's our own governances that's not equipped to deal with. There's no checks and balances as to what our tribal leadership is willing or capable to do. So that's what happened. And each community is different. I don't know other communities, but I'll tell you, in Aguasasne, there was a lot of benefit. There were a lot of people were successful in developing projects and stuff like that simply by asking for contributions from people who were in the industry. You know, mostly lacrosse teams, athletic organizations, even establishing like cancer fundraising foundations, diabetes fundraising foundations, all kinds of medical issues. The clinic got money from the contributions, and they were able to buy medical equipment that the federal government was supposed to supply, but they never did because of bureaucracy, you know. So a lot of things happened in Aguasasne that's off the record. It's not known to everybody except those that were part of it. A lot of good stuff came of it, but most of it didn't. A lot of the because after the wholesalers, then came manufacturers. People started making the cigarettes. That was a whole different layer, that more recent, and it didn't seem like the manufacturers were willing to take the position of contributing. Especially, some of them, the bigger ones, got assessed by the Internal Revenue Services of the federal government. They were assessed in tax, and they capitulated. They signed off to IRS in the American side, and today they pay federal tax for the manufacture of cigarettes in Aguasasne. Complicated.
Yeah.